Hi, my name is Shawn Shaler. That's my friend Chris Ford, aka The Objective Geek, and we have a very exciting episode for you today. Very exciting, in our
Very
humble opinion.
exciting, Sean.
I'm extremely excited about it. The only thing I'm not excited about is that it's the spoiler-free version, because today we're doing the spoiler-free review of the Shadow of Kyoshi novel. And the only part that makes me sad is that I can't say much. It's breaking my heart. I'm already like having a hard time containing different things. But we both got this like last Thursday, last Friday, something like that. Both read it in a couple of days. So got the spoiler free
Yeah, we got
review.
review copies. No, they're not review
We
copies. Just Barnes and Noble got them early for some reason,
No,
and
I
so we
like what
got
you
them
said
before the
better.
official release.
I like what you said better. FCE reached out to us, friend of the show, FCE. I actually tweeted at him like just thank you for
Yeah.
writing this novel. He didn't
The thing is,
respond.
like a week ago, maybe 10 days, about 10 days ago, I was like, "Oh man, I forgot. I actually meant to like contact the publisher, be like, can I get a review copy? Just because, hey, I review just to see if they did it." And then like
What's
two
the
days
worst that could
later,
happen, you know?
yeah, and then like 2 days later, it's like, oh, early. For some reason, Barnes and Noble has early copies. Like, oh, all right, well, forget that little ploy I had.
Yeah, I thought it was weird that just Barnes and Noble got early copies. Like, I don't know. I guess they're probably the biggest sort of national book selling chain at this point, outside of just Target or online or Amazon. But I was a little surprised. But needless to say, we both burned through it, and that's probably the one book a year that we could ever say that about. That we literally read through very quickly, just so we could put out this spoiler-free review really shortly, really soon, and then in the near future, we'll do the full review, the fully fledged, like sit down, get your popcorn ready. We're gonna talk for a couple hours about it. That'll be in the near future, so keep your eyes open for that. But for now, we're gonna try to not give away too much details and still give some kind of thoughts. Chris, the only other thing I wanted to mention before we started, and then I'll shut up, is the Legend of Korra is coming to Netflix. We just wanted to throw a real quick plug. We'll talk more about that next week as well. But I think it's
Yay!
August
14th.
14th. Thank you.
Yes, my wedding anniversary. So
Oh, no kidding. You know what's funny
10-year
is,
wedding anniversary.
what? 10-year? Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
That seems like a really long, that makes me feel very old.
It's a very long time, Sean. I'm kidding.
I, it feels like a very long time. I found out today that I proposed on my wife on the day that Skyrim came out, and at that time I didn't have anything capable of playing Skyrim, so I didn't know that. But I just found that out today. So August 14th, in my head, what happened is probably not how it happened at all. But in my head, what happened is everybody loved Avatar on Netflix so much, it was so popular for so long that they just like went to Viacom and they're like, "Give us Korra." That's probably
I
not what happened,
mean,
but
I think it's valid.
I'm gonna believe that right in here, right in here.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to it because I think sometimes the shade that Korra gets is because of the nostalgia that Avatar has for a lot of fans. And also, I think The Legend of Korra, it's more modern and a lot of its storytelling um, properties, like it's paced a lot quicker. It's to me, it's more of a bingeable show in the sense that it's every episode kind of bleeds into the next episode. Grant Avatar is very bingeable, but I feel like Legend of Korra is like, oh, it leaves you on a cliffhanger episode after episode. Like I gotta watch the next episode to see how this ends.
Maybe like highly serial as opposed. I mean, Avatar: The Last Airbender is serial in that it's one grand story arc. But as we
Yeah.
point out a lot, you can move stuff around. You can skip certain
Yes.
ones. Whereas Korra is pretty much dedicated one after the other in its respective seasons, probably.
Yes. Yes.
So yeah, August 14th, mark it on your calendars. We are very
It'll be on my
excited. We
calendar.
will celebrate that day. You know, that's my brother's birthday too, but I always forget that. And that's fine. Once you pass a certain age, birthdays don't really matter. So yeah, mark your
Yeah.
calendar. And I'm gonna be quiet now because we're gonna start the review, and I'm gonna let Chris lead the way and do his normal review things, and I'll try to chime in
Yeah.
with not TMI.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hold it.
So in this review, we'll break it down into story, emotion, action, and lasting impressions. So first off, the story of the Shadow of Kyoshi. It takes place 2 years after the events of the Rise of Kyoshi, and it's the kind of I feel like this is kind of Kyoshi in her prime. Well, maybe not necessarily in her prime, but she is like she's taking out people. She's cleaning up the Earth Kingdom, and she's kind of trying to deal with what type of avatar she wants to be. Like she's thinking about Yang Chen a lot. She got Korra as her previous past life. Like, does she want to be this vengeful spirit that just kills people because she killed like two people in the previous book? She's dealing with that. She's also, she gets invited to. It's not a big spoiler because it's in the synopsis of the book. She gets invited to the Fire Nation, and she still has to deal with spirits and things like that. And really, it's a story about Kyoshi growing into the avatar that she wants to be or inspires to be. And that's a really interesting perspective. So, Sean, so that's essentially the story. Um, what was some of your favorite things, I think, about the story for you?
I think this story did relationships extremely well of all types, the types you would expect, and then maybe the types you wouldn't expect. And I'm gonna say that something that I wouldn't have paid attention to as much before, getting as far as we have in the Avatar universe and digging as far into it. But it's become a much bigger deal since talking with you and also Jamie about relationships, and not just romantic ones, but again of all types. I think it does that really well, and all of my best memories are probably directly related to that. How about you?
Yeah, for me, I think the best thing is that I feel like I read it as a Avatar nerd, and just the history lessons that are in there. You gain such a new perspective. I think for many of the nations and a couple different avatars, that I think it's just a really informative
A couple
when it
different
comes
avatars
to
previewing a future episode there. Good plug.
uh,
Future plug.
when it comes to Kyoshi herself. I Kyoshi's so vulnerable, and I just love her vulnerability. Like, oftentimes people talk about this BA bloodthirsty Kyoshi that we might assume by her from what we see of her in Avatar: Last Airbender, but she wasn't like that at least early on. So it's just really interesting to see her early days. One of the things that I would say compared to the previous book that I didn't like as much was probably the antagonist. I love Jianju as antagonist. I mean, he was a new type of villain in the Avatar series because he was the previous Avatar's Earthbending Master. He was his friend, so he carried a lot of that baggage with that, and he personally knew Kyoshi. Also, you kind of understood where he was coming from, and that point, that understanding where the villain is coming from, and their goals are somewhat noble. I don't think it was necessarily replicated in the Shadow of Kyoshi. Granted, I still like the antagonist, and I understood where he was coming from, but I just didn't. The end goals weren't weren't good end goals, I guess.
I agree completely. Jianju, that guy, he's like a Batman villain. Like you're talking about a high level bender, and obviously somebody who is very tactful and strategic as well. Like this is a Batman villain. And in here you don't get that same vibe, but it's a different type of villain. Um, that lends itself to a different type of story. But you're right, it's not sort of a classic a classic big bad, and it's as a result maybe not quite as interesting of an antagonist. I agree.
Yeah. Oh, the good thing about this book, it is a little it plays a little bit more politics wise, like Game of Thrones, right? There's a couple of different infighting between houses. Yeah, there are houses in this book across the nations that makes it, I think, a little bit more Game of Thronesy, and also there's kind of literal. Anyway, um, don't get too far into spoilers there, but it dives a little bit more into
I
that
didn't know where you
territory,
were
I think,
going
than
to
the
go with
previous
that anyway.
book.
I was like, was there any incest in here? I don't have to think about
No,
that for a
no,
second.
Sean, no instance.
I can't remember any.
Does it? Avatar would never get that Game of Thrones, no matter how many Azuku fans there are.
Hey, you know what? If there's a good comp for Game of Thrones, that's probably it.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, the story, I found the story pretty good. Not as good as Shadow of Kyoshi, but it was still very enthralling. It still really kept me engaged. I never once got bored because I love these characters. Um, oh, and they continue to explore, like, support the kind of relation a lot of relationships that continue to explore relationship between Rangi and Kyoshi, and yeah, now that I'm not gonna spoil anything, but they continue to go through that path.
We were worried, back when we were worried that they wouldn't, and they're again trying not to spoil it too much. But I came out very satisfied with what worked out. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So the story was good. So next, the emotion. There was a couple different scenes that I think scenes, a couple different passages that I think were really emotional, and it was a different emotion than in Shadow of Kyoshi. So that's really interesting. Like great job at FCE by painting these pictures, by painting Kyoshi so vulnerable. I really love those moments. I can't wait to talk spoilers with this because there's a specific moment that I just absolutely loved.
everything you say, I
And
just there's like, can we just do spoiler review already? Come on.
we can, Shawn, but we're waiting. We had a plan.
We can do it. We
We're going to
did.
do it
It's
anyway.
fine. Just that's gonna be a long conversation though. I'll have to be extra comfy for that one.
The thing is, I was like from 9:30 to like 12:30 last night. I was like, oh, we got the spoiler review tomorrow. Okay, let me go back and just skim through, make highlights in my book, um, make passages. Like I have a bunch of highlights. I don't know if you can see. No, you probably can't see. No, you can't see.
I get the
Anyway.
general idea. I keep mine in my handy dandy Harry Potter notebook with my sticky notes as like page tabs, little labels there.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah,
meant to do that, but I don't have sticky notes anymore. I
you know
looked
the
for
thing
them,
is that
and
I
so I
write the
have to
notes
so I have to
down.
defile this book. I'm sorry.
I meant to, or I always intend to use them. Like I have good intentions, but then when we start talking, I almost never flip through them. I keep notes most weeks, almost never touch them. Oops.
So how did you feel about the emotion in the
It is a
book?
more emotional story, and maybe I already kind of said that with the relationships. I think it is a
Yeah,
more emotional story. Just the conflict, the type of antagonist that we mentioned. It's and I would say like more human emotions, not just like superhuman rage and vengeance, but like other relatable
yeah.
emotions. I would say it is more of that than the predecessor, which doesn't necessarily appeal to me, but didn't that sounds like I'm bashing. I'm certainly not. I definitely would prefer the rage revenge story, but this book nails it home.
To me, you
It
make a good
it it
point
it
about.
hooks you.
I'm
It
sorry,
gets you
keep going.
invested. No, I'm done. I don't even know where else to
I
go
know.
with it. It keeps you
No,
hooked.
to me, you make a good point about the very human emotion, like the spectrum of emotions. And I think this book, Kyoshi, it has far more personality and in this book, and she just has more character to her that that she can go into these different emotions. I also feel like the book is written far more from her perspective. Like even though the book isn't written in first person or anything, it's written in the third person. I feel like the author still everything's from kind of not everything. A lot of things are from Kyoshi's point of view. Um, and I feel like even sometimes he won't put in like a thought bubble, but he'll be like Kyoshi was thinking this, and so it just adds a little bit more character, a little bit more insight to Kyoshi's emotional
Maybe it's more of
state.
maybe it does a better job of. I'm trying to think of the word they use in video games, like more immersive. Like here, you're kind of one character, one stream of consciousness, in a singular story arc that doesn't
Yeah,
jump around quite as much geographically or in time as the previous story did. So maybe it's more of like an
yeah.
immersive feel emotionally.
But no, emotions were great. So next to action, I would say this is probably the biggest downgrade from the previous book. The previous book, I felt like I was just watching the show, like especially the scenes of her going to the Avatar state of like lifting Ju up in the air and like she's like raising fire from bushes or bushels of like of of wheat or something like that, and like the way they describe her as when she defeated Ju, she was just like a ghost taking the breath of fire out of somebody, and like it was just so easy to imagine all of that, and it was just really epic. And this one, there's not as many of those epic moments. Like if I thought about how many, I don't know, action beats there were, that I was like, oh yeah, that was a really cool action beat. Maybe there were three, but none of them really reached the heights of probably even the top five fights in Shadow in Rise of Kyoshi.
Completely agree. It I don't know. The previous book, it felt like every chapter is like its own little Tom Clancy novel. Like you're just kind of waiting on who they're gonna
Yeah.
pick a fight on next. And if I had my maybe core of my complaint with this one would be that I was kind of waiting on that to happen the whole time, and
Mm.
then it never really does. Like you said, I'm gonna say twice off the top of my head that I was kind of intrigued in that way. But in the previous novel, it's like every chapter, who's gonna
Yeah,
almost
and it
die,
was
who's gonna die.
yeah, and it was different people too. Like you'll have one chapter, it'll be Kelsang versus Jianju, or Hun versus Tagaka of the Fifth Nation, or Kyoshi versus um, Zhu, or Heiran, or not Heiran. Well, Heiran was in fights too, or Rangi versus in that little fight she got in. Like all those were action packed, and that was just a couple of them.
And very descriptively written, and they are in here too. They're just, as you said, the top one in here probably doesn't quite crack the top three or the top five in the
Yeah.
previous one. But again, I don't want to sound like we're bashing it too much because I know you weren't, and I know I'm not. Because it doesn't read the same way. It doesn't flow where you need that. It maybe just defied our expectations a little bit as we were reading through.
Yeah.
Like I said, I was kind of waiting on it to happen, and then it didn't, but it was okay.
Which is almost story driven appropriate, right?
Yeah,
Like Kyoshi, yeah, it's story to me. It's has story based reasons. Just action wise, it wasn't as much action as the previous book.
different style of novel for sure. For better or worse, just strictly depending on who reads it and what they prefer.
Yeah, yeah. Which is interesting because like to me, I don't. I've read books like other young adult books like Divergent series and Hunger Games. And really that's it because I don't read that much. um, and those the action on that things are like terrible.
Chris is like
They're
post
like
apocalypse or bust. That's what
yeah.
I want children dying or I don't care. That's where Chris
I'm,
is at right now.
I'm such a simpleton when it comes to like
I like
you read
no,
books
it's okay.
forever.
Mine's dragons. Mine's not children dying. Mine's just dragons. So same, very simple.
But like the action in those are fairly terrible compared to this book. And so to me, if you want action in any book, Shadow of Kyoshi is going to have the action for you compared to other books, but maybe just not compared to the previous installment.
I would say that to me, I don't think you read the books, but I know you've seen the movies. It's like the going from the fourth Harry Potter to the fifth Harry Potter, and that kind of stylistic jump of the first one being a very different setup than the second one. At least that's how I felt. But I'm biased
Okay.
because I really like the fourth Harry Potter.
All right, so then lasting impressions. I love this book. I read it, you know, I read it in like 2.5 days, which is a pretty short book. It's about 100 pages shorter than Rise
350
of
or something like
Kyoshi.
that, yeah.
Yeah,
Except
but
for our book from Barnes and Noble has pictures.
yeah, and it came a little earlier. Um,
That's the big part.
but yeah, I just love being in Kyoshi's headspace. This book doesn't, even though they say in the sleeve of the book that um, this is the epic conclusion to the legendary story of Avatar Kyoshi. This doesn't feel like the epic conclusion.
They
Granted that
could, they
this
could knock 2, 3 more novels out of this lady. Like she lived a long
yeah,
time. Come on,
230 years.
I'll buy another
Um,
one. So would other people. Just think of something.
so I'm hoping that LCE right now he's been in. I read an interview with him and he's like, yeah, so far I'm not signed on to do anymore. Like that's up to them. I would just love if LCE does more of these books. Or someone was saying like, oh, LCE should write on the show, on a live action Netflix show, and it got me thinking like, no, he should show run his own or write his own Rise of Kyoshi movie or TV show.
Yeah,
I would
don't
love
don't
that.
don't blend visions. Yeah, go ahead and I would say he doesn't even have to write a Kyoshi story. Go back and maybe do like what Star Wars should consider doing sometime instead of just like tying their own little web tighter and stupider. It's like go back, pick a different avatar, like far. It's true. go back, pick a different avatar that's kind of unrelated, so it maybe doesn't impact the lore canon. Give us something else. There, you don't have to pick something existing and try to fit in what's already there. That's probably what made Kyoshi great. Is there was so little like backdrop that they had to work off of. He got pretty good.
Yeah, and he definitely, in his interviews, he definitely wanted to stray from it because they're like, oh, why didn't you use Ko the Face Stealer or Chin the Conqueror? And he was like, well, that's like Kyoshi long away, and I didn't want to like create continuity issues and things like that. So no, he did great, really crafting his own world.
You don't need more Palpatines. I mean, more related characters in here. You just
yeah.
Spoiler alert. Sorry, I gotta spoil something in here. So
this is the non-spoiler for Shadow of Kyoshi, but we're gonna spoil everything else. Bruce Willis was dead.
Wait till I tell you what happens to Dumbledore in the 6th book. What were we on? Lasting impressions, right?
Yes.
I totally interrupted yours. You're probably not done.
No, I'm done. I'm done.
So I don't read a ton, but I do when I read, it is fantasy, like high fantasy fiction, like this genre. And I was like, I took to Twitter. It's in quotes. I think it's my favorite book series, just as a pair, competing with the likes of Harry Potter's, to a lesser extent, like Enchanted Forest Chronicles, and some of those older like 80s young adult fantasy novels. But I think it is my favorite book series, even at just 2 books. So yeah, not huge praise for that. Didn't read a ton, but
well, you've read enough for that to be high praise.
Enough of the genre that I think it matters. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I have not read enough, but I agree. This is better than the Hunger Games and Divergent series.
Fewer children die in these books than in the Hunger Games, and that makes me happy. I always have trouble watching the movies because I just want to watch kids killing each other. I can't do it. But that's my lasting impression. Obviously, I would say great for the series as a whole.
Yes, go pick up the book or books if you haven't read them. They're great. They stand head and shoulders with Avatar: Last Airbender and Legend of Korra as being installments into the Avatar universe. So yeah.
Absolutely. Any final thoughts? Comparison to the first one? We already kind of covered it for the most part.
Yeah.
Go get it. If you live in Kansas City or Topeka, like, come find us. We'll give it to you. You just have to promise to like talk about it with us afterwards.
Oh, I won't. But...
Oh no, I totally you can have it, but you have to promise to talk to me later and let me know your thoughts.
I'm social distancing. I don't want to be by people.
Well, I'll throw it at them from a distance. It's fine.
Throw it in your face.
Just throw the book. No, but go read these books if you're even kind of interested in Avatar, or if you're kind of interested in young adult, maybe slightly older than young adult, like maybe it's a slightly older. It's like the end of Harry Potter age range of books rather than the beginning. If you're into that stuff, go grab it, because it stands alone as a great story as well. Go grab it. That's all I got. This has been Avatar as Podcasters Shadow of Kyoshi spoiler-free review. Come back in a couple weeks, hopefully next week, for the full-length spoiler edition.